So good evening and welcome to this gala dinner with Stefanos Kasselakis, leader of the main opposition in Greece, and thank you very much for joining us. I wanted to say, just by introduction, that there is a wonderful tradition at this event of not just hearing from the government, but hearing from the opposition leaders, particularly the main party of opposition, and that's been true of over many years with all parties. Your predecessor, Mr. Tsipras, joined this event while he was in opposition and then when he was in government and so on. So I'm very grateful that you continue that tradition, and of course it's your second time here. You joined us last year when you'd just taken over, so we're going to sort of fill in the gaps in between, I hope.
It's been a very smooth ride.
Exactly. Nothing much has happened and everything's been easy. That's what we're going to talk about. The place perhaps to start, because we've been talking about a lot over these past 2 days, are the elections that just happened, the European elections and the fallout from those elections. So perhaps start with your assessment, first of all, at the European level, and then we'll come to Greece. But how do you interpret what has just happened and the kind of minor earthquake that seems to have certainly be shaking up France as a result?
I think it's a sad moment for Europe to see the right and the far right take over, to sweep in such a way. And unfortunately, it's not a surprising moment. We had similar reactions 5 years ago. Perhaps back then it was more motivated by the migration issues. And right now it's motivated not so much because of the social issues, but because of pure financial, economic, incentive structure systems, in my view. Meaning, a lot of European citizens view Brussels as a bureaucracy. They view Brussels as a hub for lobbying, and they don't feel that they can participate in the economic promise of the single market and the EU policies. And ultimately, that's what the far right is about. It's citizens saying to Europe that they want to take sovereignty back in their hands. And I think that is a very dangerous precedent, what we're seeing right now, because the European Union has been a very successful political experiment, probably the most successful political experiment in history. But it's because of solidarity. It's because we've had real, truly continental leaders who were able to inspire the promise of solidarity and peace and prosperity. And unfortunately, I think we have a crisis of political leadership in Europe. And we have people who feel disenfranchised and disenchanted with their daily lives, the cost of living, their ability to participate in the promise. And so I think the left, the progressive forces who, frankly took a beating in this election, have a real task ahead of them, which is to inspire people that there's a different government model than just privatizing everything and this being a financial negotiation. And so we need not only a new RRF package following 2026, but we also need real proactive policies when it comes to the North supporting the South, and when it comes to climate adaptation. That is an issue that is a prime issue that requires solidarity across Europe, and if Europe doesn't show that, unfortunately, I think the South is going to be disproportionately hurt by climate change.
I suppose it raises the question, the way that you've answered that raises the question of the extent to which the European elections are really about Europe and the extent to which they're really a series of 27 national elections or tests of opinion, snapshot of opinion. Do you think people were really voting about Europe, or were they really just saying, this is what I think of my government right now?
I think it's half and half. I don't think that it's only for messaging to a government. I do think people understand they're voting for a European ballot because they see the candidates that they are voting for. I will tell you that during my trips to Brussels, committee chairs have vented to me that about 70% of members of the European Parliament are there more for retirement than for actually carrying out the policy changes that are so important. About 80% of what we do in our countries depends on Europe, and especially on issues such as artificial intelligence. We absolutely depend on Europe, and certainly on migration, and this country here knows it very full well, what ought to be done there. And by the way, I have criticized the Greek government for not adequately investigating the shipwreck from last summer in our search and rescue zone, where to this date we don't have an internal criminal investigation in the Coast Guard, in our Coast Guard. So the fact that we've had Europe for our own rule of law issues has been certainly helpful, and that is the role of Europe. The role of Europe is to hold national governments accountable to a high standard, right? And that is the point of solidarity when countries are able to improve. So I do think that it's not just about the national governments and sending a message.
So let's turn it to Greece and your assessment of how Greece voted in the European elections. Obviously, some disappointment for your party, disappointment for other parties as well. What do you think was going on?
Yeah, I mean, besides the far right, I don't think anybody in Greece can say that they're victorious from this outcome. Certainly the more systemic or mainstream parties also took a beating. But let me say that for the circumstances that my party, the main opposition party, has had to encounter over the past 9 months, I was here, I think, my first month, this conference. So it's only been 9 months. It feels like a century sometimes, but it's only been 9 months. I am proud that we came in, a strong second with a much smaller gap to New Democracy. I think that the fact that the current government is no longer above the fray with this mantra of 41%, and which incubated a form of arrogance, which I think permeated across the cabinet and many of the decisions they've taken. I think it's a very positive thing for our country that the government feels like they can be punished, and that people pay attention to the issues. Because allow me to say that this 28% did not happen out of thin air. It didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened because, and I listened to the Prime Minister's chat with you, I think, here last night. He admitted that they had a big dent, a big drop in their numbers largely because of cost of living and cost of goods. Well, SYRIZA was the party that raised this issue. We had a policy proposal, a bill in Parliament with tangible proposals to ease the pain on the consumer while also having the right counterweights for financial stability. And guess what? After the European election, they actually did carry out one of our measures for an excise tax on excess profits, let's say, for the refineries. That was one of our proposals. So we had a higher number for the one-off tax, the windfall tax, but it shows that what we said before the election actually had merit, and it worked to some extent. Same thing when it comes to the environment. We had a series of issues we raised there, and about the lack of adequacy for the civil protections for prevention and the healthcare sector. We made a big campaign about this to showcase the fact that the hospitals in our country are understaffed by 50%, 40 to 50%, almost universally. And for us, for the left, for the modern left, healthcare is not a public good, it's a right. Universal healthcare is a right. If you are born or if you are, rather, a Greek citizen, you ought to have quality, free healthcare. And to do that, you clearly need to staff the hospitals. I had nurses and doctors and all sorts of staff from the hospitals literally cry on me about not being unable to take it any longer because they are left alone to deal with people, their local communities, who have no outlet. And I can tell you many stories about how the current cabinet has treated, these heroes, in my view, because they were the ones who kept society afloat. I'm an ex-Goldman Sachs banker. I have many friends from Goldman Sachs during COVID in Manhattan who went off to their vacation homes in the Hamptons or in Florida or wherever they went. And, my partner at the time and I, he was a nurse practitioner at the NYU Langone Hospital, was there in the ICU every night shifts, the same mask for 2 weeks because of the lack of PPE. And, I saw the stark difference, of who keeps society afloat at times of crisis. And we need to take care of these people because we depend on them. And their disposable income that they have from their service at this time of, our historical cycle in the country is despicable. They're unable to educate their kids. They're unable to pay their bills. And they're the people we depend on during a pandemic, during a fire, a wildfire. If, God forbid, if there's a defense issue. We need a big recalibration about how we think about our economy. I saw the Prime Minister thank you in a jocular way about the ranking that the Economist gave the country, joking that the visits paid off. Unfortunately, people don't eat the Economist ranking for breakfast. People are struggling, and I saw that across the country. 20% of society, I think, is faring well and improving in our country. I am not somebody who's going to, paint something in a way that's one size fits all. There is a part of society that is feeling a decent amount of well-being and is optimistic about their future prospects. I think 80% of society, that's my empirical, let's say, the empirical evidence I've collected is that 80% of society, having spoken to thousands and thousands of people, and I've spent a lot of time out not only campaigning, but also listening to people. I take notes from when people talk to me out there. I connect them to people that can be helpful to them. I think 80% of the country is either stagnant or actually in panic mode. And rest assured that the image that we portray is sometimes, with the convergence that parts of Athens and industry and the islands have, doesn't filter through all the way down. And we see that in the Eurostat numbers as well. We're the second from the bottom when it comes to purchasing power. Why is that? And I'll close with this and then I'll pass it back to you. Why is it that our country has been a member of the European Economic Community, the European Community, the European Union since 1981? We're like 43, 44 years now in the European Union, let's say. And we were the 10th member to join, the first poor member to join compared to Benelux, etc. Why is it that so many other countries have surpassed us? The one time that our purchasing power and the GDP per capita converged or came close to converging with the EU average was in 2007. And we know what happened after. So it was all fictitious and leverage. Why is it? Why is it that we're the worst country when it comes to youth 18 to 35 years of age, myself being 36, living in their childhood bedroom still, 72% of youth? Why have we failed? And the answer is, and I'll close with this, it's political leadership. Politicians have disappointed in this country. They have kicked my generation out because of the failure of their leadership and their policies. And it is, I think, a real societal need and requirement going forward, frankly, that the older generations let my generation fix the issues. Right. We deserve the chance to return to our country and to make this country prosperous.
Yeah. So that, when you say that, there's political leaders of both parties that have been
all
in power over time. But I wanted to ask...
SYRIZA governed only one time, but of all parties.
I want to come on to some of your solutions to this in a moment. But you mentioned yourself, 9 months, you came to our event last year just after taking over as party leader. What have you learned in these 9 months? What are your main takeaways from both in your role as party leader and about Greece?
I've learned that the most important thing to do as a leader is to listen to people. And by listening, you learn, and you have a compass for what it is you want to achieve. And it's very easy to be tempted by shortcuts to get to your goal, but that one needs to be true to himself or herself if the path is worth it. And believe me that I truly mean this. I've tried to deal with people with good faith. In good faith, meaning actually try to integrate and unify the party and get over the stereotypes people might have had or their legacy feelings for the internal party dynamics, or within parliament, or in the country with some of the things from the SYRIZA legacy that were tough on society. It takes time, and unfortunately, not everybody has genuine incentives to deal in good faith, to reciprocate in good faith with you. I've genuinely tried to do that. From that point on, I'm no fool. Like, I will do what needs to be done so that we can get a government that is genuinely for the people and without any type of dependencies. I think the Greek people should know that if I am their prime minister, I will not need to get anyone's permission to do what is right for the societal whole, and especially for labor, and especially for people who are at the outskirts of society. We have more than 26% of the country dealing with poverty and the risk of social exclusion. So we need to build a party that is truly independent. And the name of our party doesn't translate perfectly in English, the word radical. What it tries to say is that we are groundbreaking, right? That we can bring positive radical changes. Well, we have some huge issues that have never been resolved in our country, and maybe some radical thinking here and there might be good for our country. So
what is the direction you want to take your party in? As you hinted, not everybody has been happy with the direction you've moved it in. Some have left.
Yeah.
So how should we, outside the party, interpret the direction of travel? Is it towards the center? Is it to, or maybe these definitions are wrong? I think
people get very confused with these definitions. They are shortcuts. They have content to them, but it's also nebulous. So we need to avoid the nebulous content and speak more in concise terms, in clear terms. I believe in the modern left. The modern left can be a modern paradigm for how open markets can work with the right regulation, with the right public goods and rights, just like healthcare and education, and with an appropriate interventionist government. The issue I said before about the housing crisis for the youth, or the issue of public healthcare. I also saw the Prime Minister here discuss the healthcare challenges and that are huge. I mean, let me remind him that he's been Prime Minister for 5 years and that we've had a pandemic and all these funds from the EU, including funds from the RRF that we would have used for healthcare. So the current position of the country in healthcare is despicable under his leadership. And mixing in private profit with healthcare, public healthcare, is not something that we are in favor of. It's two different priorities, and they need to be separate. So that is a modern left philosophy when it comes to markets and education and healthcare. When it comes to foreign policy, I have said very clearly that we are in favor of NATO, but only as a defensive alliance. We do not want our country to be dragged into adventures, that the U.S. may decide from time to time. We do not think that providing military equipment, to Ukraine necessarily a wise choice for our country, given the financial and our own geopolitical challenges that we have. There's other ways we can contribute. And we do agree with the Prime Minister on...
Can I just be clear on that one, because it's an important one. Do you fully support Ukraine's defense against the Russian invasion?
1,000%.
Yeah.
And not only do we need to support it, we need to support it vociferously, because we too, as a peoples, had an invasion in Cyprus about 50 years ago. And Europe can't have two standards here. Europe can't apply a different standard to Ukraine than to Cyprus. We have a European capital that is divided this day in Europe. And the European Union should take a much more clear position on that. That is the ethical thing to do, and that is the policy consistent thing to do. So 100% we should support Ukraine and never recognize the Russian invasion or appease it. At the same time, by the way, we should recognize the state of Palestine now. Right now. What are we waiting for? Netanyahu's roadmap to leave no path for a two-state solution? To raise 80% of Gaza down to rubble, as if that's how you combat Hamas? We need to hold Israel accountable for its actions to so many civilians. Counterterrorism and slaughtering civilians is two different things. And we need Europe to take a clear stance on that. That's why people are not inspired by Europe anymore. It's a financial bargaining pool, and then it's, every country is kind of left on its own. There's no clear message.
So if you look around the rest of Europe, for example, do you see other parties that are in a similar direction as the SYRIZA that you want? I mean, for example, the British Labour Party that looks as if it's set to win power tomorrow. Is that the sort of direction you want to go in?
I think there's a lot of lessons from the Labour Party that we can adopt. Unfortunately, in my view, the Labour Party in the UK are not in EU politics anymore. So we can't call, let's say, on that example as a paradigm for our purposes. But yeah, it serves a lot of, there's a lot of aspects of what's happened to Labour and how Labour has restructured itself over the past several years that we ought to emulate. We have a crisis of progressive leadership in Europe, unfortunately, and we need to really bolster the leaders that we do have and try to cultivate examples for up-and-coming leaders. We have only a few examples in Europe right now to point to, but I do think, and I'm confident, that the pendulum will swing back our way, because when people realize that dealing with issues on their own with a stringent neoliberal, let's say, policy framework, when they realize that that doesn't actually solve the issues, they will have to go toward a much more government-oriented
and when you say back
approach.
your way, do you think that the Greek parties of the left need to get together? So for you and PASOK, for example, is that something that you could imagine, or is that never going to happen?
I think I've answered that question 10 million times the past week, but let's...
You can answer it again, it's all right, just for the sake of everybody in the room.
The parties are not businesses to have mergers and acquisitions. Although, when you do merge, you do take on another party's debts. So perhaps that is an aspect to be discussed. PASOK has a very revered history, especially in the 80s with Andreas Papandreou, who was a truly groundbreaking prime minister that I personally admire. At the same time, it's also one of the two governments that, as I said before in my introduction, caused my generation to leave the country. That that led us to the current huge debt overload that we still have. Also, when it comes to an issue that I've been, I think, very vocal about, which is the equality in marriage issue, 35% of PASOK abstained from that vote. I think 33% of your democracy abstained from the vote. So the question is, what PASOK are we talking to? That's the issue when you're dealing with a center. It's not clear what your philosophy is. So,
not sure I heard no in there. I didn't hear no.
No, as I said in Parliament, it's very important that we start working together on policy proposals. I'm sure that PASOK and SYRIZA can work together on the housing intervention program we need to have, on healthcare. I want to hear from PASOK if they want to recognize the state of Palestine now or after a roadmap. And we have a strong disagreement when it comes to the position on North Macedonia, but that's, let's say, old news at this point compared to other issues that are truly pressing for the people who are hurting out there. So we need to talk on policy proposals first. I mean, is PASOK progressive or not? I can tell you in very clear terms that SYRIZA is very progressive, that SYRIZA will not compromise with, let's say, the entrenched interests of a crony capitalist system, which is exactly what the Greek capitalist system is. We will absolutely make changes that will hurt some interests and will help others, because there's sectors such as the construction sector that will benefit from our program. Because we want to decentralize the country out of Athens. We want to build small university campuses to bring back scientists from overseas and create hubs around the universities that we have. So we want to invest in innovation with big government does not mean big spending or big waste. I guarantee you that the Greek state right now has a massive amount of waste. A lot of it is via regional governments and these development companies that have direct contracts. And a lot of it is in sectors that are oligopolies, which even the European Union has confirmed, such as and certainly the Prime Minister's predecessor spoke to in his speech 2 days ago, such as the banking sector and the electricity sector. I mean, having a utility have a profit margin of 15 and 20% is absurd. Utilities in the US, as you may know, are like bonds. They're considered safer than bonds, than government bonds. And here it's like an ATM machine that keeps on giving. And I saw the Minister of Finance, who, unfortunately, I don't want this to sound as a personal attack per se, but unfortunately has never worked in the real economy. I think a Minister of the Economy and Finance should actually have some experience in business before taking over that job. Actually now said that if banks don't change their fees on transactions and then the interest differential between deposits and loans, that he will proceed to some form of regulation. What has he been doing for so many years? What have they been doing? They're just letting Greek people get poor, to have record profits for the publicly traded companies in the Athens Stock Exchange. And I'm happy they have profits. We want all businesses to have profits. But when you can't have 9 out of 10 small businesses have no access to bank financing and then have record profits in the Athens Stock Exchange, since when did Greece become the Wall Street of Wall Streets? Well, we have all these other issues. So we want to have a very clear message from other progressive forces that they are progressive like us, and there will be some red lines that we have, and we will see. But it needs to be born from the ground up. Nobody can force it. I am open, personally, to not being part of the problem here. If myself, my person, is the issue that a programmatic convergence will not materialize into a government, I promise you I will step down. I have no issue with being stuck to power or to prestige or anything like that. I want to be helpful. I genuinely have returned to my homeland to be helpful. If PASOK wants to coordinate on policies, I'm here to talk, we are here to talk, SYRIZA is here to talk, and to try to do the right thing for the Greek people, and we see where it goes. Anybody trying to force situations from the outside will face a big counter-reaction from the SYRIZA base.
And from the perspective of your own party, are you sure you carry them with you in this? I mean, you've had some defections. You have a Politburo meeting tomorrow. Is that an important one, that you're establishing direction?
I think the party base, the thousands and thousands of voters and members of the party that we have, and new members that we have, they want SYRIZA to be strong. They don't want SYRIZA to melt into some type of amalgam that makes no sense. They don't want SYRIZA to compromise with entrenched interests. So that, for me, is a red line, right? Now, a strong SYRIZA can lead a process for a progressive alliance, as it is literally stated in our name. The people that you're speaking to who may have strong feelings about me right now actually want to force that alliance. But I can guarantee you the message from the base is, first we want SYRIZA to be strong, independent, and not compromised. And then we need to let the right conditions take place to get to the result. Rest assured that we're not blind to what's happening out there. We see exactly what's going on. We see the policy failures that are taking place right now. And we know we will be called to take action for the Greek people when the time comes. The Prime Minister said 2027. You know, I believe him. And therefore we have time not only to create the right foundation to have a progressive government in 2027, but we have time to create the right policy proposals and try to pass them. Rest assured that Mr. Mitsotakis will not agree with our bills. They will not pass, but the Greek people will know that there's bills ready to become laws, and laws for all of the Greek citizens.
So could you just outline a couple of those bills, the most important ones that would be your flagship proposals?
I think taxation needs to be a flagship proposal. Businesses pay an advance deposit for their income tax. That makes no sense. Large businesses pay the same tax rate as small businesses. I think we need a progressive tax rate. We need to have a way more progressive tax rate when it comes to personal income tax than what it is now, a much more progressive curve with big tax deductions for incomes especially below 60,000 euro. And we need to have a stable tax system. We need politicians out of it. It needs to be stable for 10 years. Politicians should not be mingling with it to be able to curry favor with business interests. And we need business income to be taxed once earned, not based on a theoretical formula. And when it's taxed, then it needs to apply within reason to your personal income tax. Right now we have a huge disparity between taxation on labor versus dividends, business dividends. And that clearly hasn't worked for convergence. It has not worked for the purpose of convergence. I mean, we see that in the statistics from Eurostat. So I think taxation for us is a pillar because honestly, that's kind of like where everything in the economy starts. And our country has some of the highest indirect taxes in Europe. I think 17% of our GDP is indirect taxes versus 11% in the rest of Europe. And indirect taxes is like inflation. You know, they are a form of making the weaker members of society poor. So we got to change that around.
So we don't have much time left, but I want to ask a couple more questions, if I may. First is to turn away from...
People getting hungry?
No, that's the great tradition in Greece as well, to talk before dinner. So to get hungry is normal, as I understand it in Greece. I want to ask you, because you know America well.
According to some Greeks, I should go back there.
No,
Yeah.
but you're here, but you watch, I'm sure, what happens in America very closely. So what do you make of the situation right now in America? I mean, everybody is following this with not just huge interest, but I mean, it matters hugely what the outcome of this election is in the United States.
It does.
It matters, obviously, for America, but it matters for Europe and for all America's allies. So do you have any thoughts about where things should go from here and where things might go from here?
I watched the debate. I was in the US when it took place. I worked in 2007, 2008 on Joe Biden's campaign in the primary against Obama and Clinton. I had the option to start at the White House in 2009 after graduating in the middle of the financial crisis. I chose to work with his team, meaning I chose to go into finance, as is well known. I'm open about it. I love Joe Biden. I really do. I think he has balanced the right type of consensus, bipartisan politics with the right hard progressive politics, the policies that need to be implemented, such as with the student debt relief and the Inflation Act, and also his position on some foreign policy matters, not Palestine. I think that's a disappointment, to be clear. I do not think that it will be easy for him to be reelected, given what was seen by people like myself who've loved him. And I think the age is a real issue. I mean, he admits that. He says that it's a real issue. Someone could theoretically ask the question, if there's an age limit to get into the Senate, or I think it's 35 to be president, if I recall correctly, as an age limit, shouldn't there be an age limit?
To be president as well. I think it's 35 to be president.
I think it's 35. Yeah. I think it's 30 for the Senate and 35 to be president. Yeah. So if you have a downward, let's say, limit, shouldn't you have a cap on age to be president? Shouldn't you have a cap on age to have somebody driving on the streets a certain car? It's a tough measure perhaps to say that, but it's very important, I think, to have a discussion, an open discussion about it. And to his credit, he's very, let's say, honest and transparent about it. I think it would facilitate things greatly for the world if the Democratic leadership going to the election could be one that wouldn't raise these types of concerns.
Very clear, thank you. Last question, a more whimsical one. Do you regret coming back to Greece?
No.
Simple answer.
That's the truth.
Yes.
No, and all kidding aside, it's been, now I'm talking like I'm going back, but it's been a true honor to be, the country's main opposition leader. I never thought, a year ago, extremely few people knew of me. I never thought that I would experience this thing. I want you to believe me that it's weird for somebody to leave their country at 14 and come back at 35, and for all these childhood and teenage memories and for them to float up, to emerge from your subconscious and really shape your personality in a mix of how you were and how you have been as an adult. And, I'm trying to, genuinely, every day, I'm trying to become more Greek in the way that I think the country, and rightfully so, expects of me to become, because I do think they see empathy and they do see that I understand the issues, but also to assimilate more to the culture here versus, the US and large metropolitan areas overseas that I've lived in. But at the same time, I've had people who say, well, hopefully he never learns how to be Greek, implying like don't get into the system and be absorbed and lose faith and and have this defeatism. I hate this defeatism of our country, that nothing can change. You know, that's Greece, that's the way things are. And one of the biggest applause lines I've had anywhere I've spoken, from villages to large cities, is when I say, every day we wake up, we choose what Greeks we are, what type of Greeks we are. Are we modern European citizens, or are we remnants of the Ottoman Empire? And people like truly react to that, because, you know, being Greek, it's not just culture and tradition, it's a choice. It's a choice who we want to be. It's a choice for us to shape what being Greek means. There's a cultural choice, and we have two big poles, let's say, opposite poles in our country when it comes to being culturally progressive and being culturally conservative. I get it. I'm very proud that in this past election we won the youth again. We took back. We lost the youth. Now we're again #1 in this very important dynamic audience.
Which age group
17
is that?
to 35.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think people know, even from the culturally conservative side, that I respect them. I want to form bridges with them and to understand their issues. I'm not punitive in terms of, you know, that you are a bigot or something like that. Like I don't paint people in broad strokes. I do believe people have good intentions at heart. So culturally, I think we can bridge toward progress. And then I think the rest comes down to policy. We got to have clear policy proposals that people can believe that somebody can actually implement, an independent government. So.
Thank you very much. I think we'll leave it there, but I do appreciate you coming here this evening and explaining your policies. Thank you.